Shalom and welcome to our study of head coverings. Now, our last session we had dealt with the halakha from Judaism concerning men having their heads covered. And I gave some of the tradition of where it came from, the understanding of where this came from. I'd like to recap that because I want to take it to a new level in this session. First off, we had the Kohanim, or the priesthood. This, of course, is going to be for the tribe of Levi, from the house of Aaron. All of those descendants are going to be Kohanim, or priests, and they are required, according to the Torah, to have their heads covered when they are in the Holy Temple. Now, the head covering of the normal priest is called a miznefet. And the high priest has a special head covering, and it has a plate on the front of it. We'll talk a little bit about this in just a few minutes. It's called the seats. You would spell that in the English, T-Z-I-T-Z, the seats. And I'm going to show you an illustration of that. Now, there was a death penalty if a priest was uncovered in the temple. Now, based upon Exodus chapter 19, it says that you will be a holy nation and a royal priesthood, speaking to all of Israel, all the tribes, not just the tribe of Levi and the family of Aaron, but they're all priests, not in the temple, but to their own families. And so the custom was that just like the priest, if they went to the temple, they had to have their head covered. It wasn't a matter of, I'll do it this time, but next time I don't think I will. It wasn't that way. Everybody that went to the temple had their heads covered. Now, this extended, of course, to prayer, to eating your food, that any time that you ate your food, there was a blessing. There was the grace after the meal. So anytime you were coming before God, when you were reading the Torah, you would cover your head. Now, in the Middle East, even to this day, when you're there, you have your head covered. You see a lot of Israelis that have no head covering on, but we live in a world of air conditioning and offices and automobiles with air conditioning. But if you are out in the open for any extended time, most people would have their heads covered. And certainly in the ancient times, a head covering was not going to be unusual. Today, the head covering that we see on most Jewish men is called a kippah, which simply means a dome. In Yiddish, it's known as a Yamaka. If you look at this on the internet, more than likely what you'll find is that this was not the ancient custom, but rather it was something that evolved as Jews moved out of the area of Israel, moved into Europe and into Asia and so forth, that they had different head coverings that they had, and eventually the kippah emerged. However, now we know that the kippah actually originated in the Holy Temple. It was suspected for quite a while, but we now have the proof. And I want to show you an illustration. This was sent to me by a very well-known rabbi. It was drawn by one of the leading rabbis on the Holy Temple. And this was back in 2005. Now, the Temple Institute, when they initially were founded back in 1988, their first project of building the garments and the equipment and the furniture for the temple was to make this plate. This is the seats. And this plate says, "Holy to the Lord." Now, here in where you'd have the four-letter name of God, the rabbi spelled it without the hay being complete, because he can't write it where it could be destroyed. But this plate, this drawing was based upon a scroll that they got in 2005. It was given to them at their request by the Vatican. It was in their vaults. And it described in more detail than they previously had the garments of the high priest, and in particular the seats. And they launched a new project to build a new seats, which they've now done. Now, right here above the ear, and this is just a black and white of the original that they sent me, but right here was a kippah, because the scroll described the kippah, or the kippah that he had under his head covering, that was there for, it was made of techelet. Now, techelet is going to be the sky blue color made from a burek shell. Very, very expensive. Now, remember that if a priest is uncovered in the temple, or in fact anybody is uncovered in the temple, there was a death penalty. There is one part of the temple services. It's held in, I'm going to show you where. It's going to be held in this building right here. This is called the Beit of Titus, and this is where the Sanhedrin met in a chamber called the Lishkat HaGazit. Now, in the Tractate Tamid of the Mishnah, as well as in the Tractate Yoma, which deals with Yom Kippur, it describes how they selected the priests for the various jobs. They're going to have 13 jobs that they have to select priests for. This is called casting the lots. Now, you have a temple official. He's called the Hamanude, which means the permanent official. He's a Levite. And so his job, he's going to be a supervisor. He's going to bring all of the priests that are on duty that morning into this chamber. And then he gives a call. And he says, those for the incense, let the old timers, let the new come, because you're only allowed for that job one time. For the other jobs, he says, let the new and the old timers come, for the other 12 jobs. Now, he stands in the middle. So I'm going to say that I'm the Hamanude. And then he has standing around him in a circle, he's going to have all of the Kohanim. There might be 100 of them, maybe 200. He thinks of a number. Now, this number, he thinks of the number, and then he tells the priests to raise their fingers. Okay? And he's going to start counting. Now, they are allowed to raise one finger or two fingers. They can't raise three. They can't raise four. Nor can they raise a thumb. But they can raise one finger or they can raise two fingers. And so he starts counting. Now, but wait a second. He's going to get lost because everybody's wearing the same clothes. And he's going to get lost. They all have beards. And he has to have some way to distinguish which priest he's going to start his count with, because he's going to count the fingers till he comes to the number that he had come into his head. He believes that number came from God. God is selecting the individuals for that job. And so he takes the miznefet off. Okay? He takes the priestly headgear off. But wait, that man would be subject to a death penalty because he's uncovered in the temple. What we know now is that they had a kippah. By the way, that means dome. He had a kippah underneath his miznefet. And now we know that that is the origin of the kippah. Now, I mentioned that a man had to have his head covered when he's praying, when he is eating his meal. He says any blessing he says, he's studying the Torah. Let's say he is going to prophesy. Then he would have his head covered. And so that does not have to be a kippah. It can be a baseball cap. It can be any kind of covering that he puts on his head. There's been times that I was without a head covering and needed to say a blessing, and I would place my hand over my head. There's been times that I would place a napkin over my head. So I don't want you to understand that I'm saying a kippah is something that was required. I'm just telling you the history of where it came from. One last point before we close this session out is that by the time of the 1st century, it had become the custom to wear a head covering on the head at all times. And in fact, in the Talmud, we read of the story where one of the major rabbis would say that a righteous man would not walk 4 cubits without having his head covered. So I'm going to close for now, and then in our next session we'll go into 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and see what that tells us about head coverings. Shalom. Shalom. I hope you enjoyed the teaching we just went through. We have more that we have planned, but I'd like to show you my newest book. This is called Measure the Pattern, Volume 1. It deals with the latest research on the Holy Temple. It shows definitively exactly where the temple building was, all the various structures, the courtyards, and more than I can describe here. Go to our website. There's a link below and check the book out.